good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to this episode of the Life with a Why interview series podcast. This is the interview series where we find out why people do what they do. And today we're interviewing Daniel Kyne, CEO and founder of OpinionX. Now, one of my main regrets from my time in college was not spending more time with Daniel Kyne. He and I spent a lot of time in different classes together. We knew each other from different society things. However, we hadn't really formed a real strong bond until after college. Daniel is one of those impressive people that you just sense a level of success from. Today, we talk about his entrepreneurial journey, what brought him to that, the characteristics that he has that allowed him to go on this journey and to be as successful as he has been when he started, how he started. If you are interested in why people go on an entrepreneurial journey so early in their lives, this is the right episode for you. However, Daniel is also quite wise, and we've got a lot of advice today that everyone can use regardless what age you are or where you're at in your life. So, let's get cracking. Daniel Kyne, how are you, man? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. It's getting towards the end of the day, and I feel like I've had a productive one, which is usually my little barometer for whether I've had a good day or not. It's very tied to whether I feel like I've got work done. Overall, I mean, feeling good. The last few weeks have been real positive. I've been spending good time with different people who are real positive as well, which is always a big thing. I've finally gotten back to the gym. I haven't properly been to the gym since before Christmas with everything closed, and here in Portugal they've just reopened recently, so I've been dying to get back. I've been dying to get back, and I'm really glad to be back to that. It just kind of ties my whole structure together, and I don't feel all this exercise guilt hanging over me the whole time. So I'm glad to be back to that.
Exercise guilt, I like it. Do you guys have barbers and hairdressers open?
We do. So the worst part is, apparently they were open the entire time, and we assumed that they were closed.
All I needed was a flight.
We were just giving each other haircuts for months. I actually got quite good. I was giving myself haircuts for a good while there, and they were decent enough. And then, right as we were moving from the Algarve up to Lisbon, we realized that they were open the entire time.
Next pandemic. Now you'll know for the next pandemic.
I'll know for next time.
Exactly, man. Well, look, at this stage of the podcast, some people will have a general idea as to who you are. I will have described who I think you are, but can I ask, who are you from your perspective?
It's a funny way to word the question. Usually it's so easy to just slip into the CV points, but you do a nice way of kind of more about me. I'll hit the CV points anyway, out of force of habit. So my name's Daniel Kyne. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a startup called OpinionX. What we do is we help people who have ideas for new products or features or companies to figure out if it's a good idea or not, which essentially what our product is. It's like a free tool for idea validation, and it shows you whether the problem that you're trying to solve is important to the people you're trying to solve it for, which really is like the biggest factor for success in any project, whether it's a new business or not. All this whole startup space is something I've been really personally invested in for a long time. I started taking part in hackathons and trying to set up my own first app when I was about 16 in transition year. And that kind of pulled me into the whole world of tech conferences and startup weekends, which I got more and more involved in over the years. By the time I was 19, I became a global facilitator for Techstars, which basically involved flying to different countries around Europe and hosting hackathon events for long weekends and introducing hundreds of people to entrepreneurship for the first time, which is overall over the last 5 years or so has just been an incredible experience. One of my favorite things that I've had the opportunity to do. And then I've done a few other funny bits here and there. I spent a year over in London with Unilever as a digital and innovation lead for ice cream in the UK, which involved inventing my own ice cream brand, which was an experience.
What was it called?
It was called Freeze Blast. It never ended up in the market, but we did some trial launches and stuff. So between working in the factories and with development agencies and everything, kind of the whole package of that product was a cool project.
That wasn't your only excursion into the world of ice cream, was it?
What? Oh, well, no. So when I was in DCU, along with a group of other people in Enactus in DCU, set up a social enterprise called Second Scoop, where we were partnered with Ben and Jerry's initially, and then on our own as it grew, to help ex-prisoners and asylum seekers integrate into Irish society. So it was a combination of like soft skills workshops and work experience opportunities as well, all aimed around societal reintegration as well. So that was like there's like a little behind the scenes running team of ice cream. I mean, whenever I've not been in an ice cream job, I've just been eating a lot of ice cream as well. So it's probably always been there.
Always in the background. That is the theme. That is you'll get to the end. It was there all along.
Exactly.
So that's that's very impressive. Like anybody listening will be like, damn, this guy was flying around the world running hackathons when he was what, 19, 20? Less? Outside of the world of tech, outside of the world of tech startups.
Yeah.
Who are you?
It's a good question. I am someone who's very interested in music. I spend an extortionate amount of time listening to music. Probably in 2020, I think I spent 25 to 30% of the entire year I was awake just listening to music. So it's something that I'm really passionate about, and I spend a lot of time doing. I'm desperately missing live gigs. There was a stage where I was going to a gig at least every 2 weeks, and I miss that a lot. It's probably the thing that, other than just basic social interaction, that I'm looking forward to most post-COVID. That I mentioned already, exercise is something that I really love. It's something that fell out of my life for a few years there towards the end of secondary school and start of college, after I finished up playing a lot of team sports, which would have been basically like my whole childhood. But I've gone back into that, and that's something I'm passionate about as well. I mean, overall, I'm quite an like extroverted person. So I love basically any sort of social opportunity, whether that's like a group of people hanging out in small groups or just any sort of open street party is just ideal. So anything like that, I love getting my hands on.
I can see it on the smile in your face. Like, and you've always been like a very energetic, outgoing person. Or maybe not. We'll get into that. I assume you have though. But no, it's like, so what would have been the most amazing adventure you've ever been on? Like the wildest thing? No, those are two different things. Whichever one you want to pick. But like when I said the word adventure, a memory kicked into your head. What was that?
The first one that kicked into my head was the summer of 2019, which was an adventure for so many reasons. So I went from living in London towards the end of that summer, quickly dropped my stuff off at home, and then jumped over to the US for 2.5 months on what was initially just meant to be like a normal J1, like the work experience and a few weeks road trip. But while I was over there, I got picked by this nonprofit called CIEE to represent Ireland at like a civic leadership summit in Washington, D.C. And they ended up spending like a week and a half flying me all up and down the East Coast. I saw like so many states. I stayed with some friends in Boston from DCU, went from Boston up to New Hampshire, Vermont, and spent like 3 or 4 days at a US summer camp that my brother's been working at for a few years. And we did hiking and big like darts and beer nights and everything with a load more people there. I came back to Boston again and stayed with this lovely Irish-American family that I'd never met before, hosting a neighborhood barbecue. I slept in their attic, and that was one of the most amazing nights. And then I went to Washington, D.C. for the summit that I was meant to be going to the whole time. And that lasted for 4 days. And there was, I think, 42 different nationalities represented at it. And that was basically what I was saying about like the quirkier the social engagement or the better. This was like a mad mix of cultures. People were from all sorts of countries. There was very low representation of the usual countries we would engage with from like an Irish perspective. Like there was not that much of Western Europe, no like Canada, US. It was like all these different far-flung countries and loads of people who on a page were very similar to me. They were all these sort of extroverted people on this adventure in the US for the summer, and that was an incredible experience. A lot of them I still talk to, some of them every week. Like just a mad eccentric group of friends that I have now. But overall, that week and a half was a crazy adventure. And as soon as I finished it, I flew back to the West Coast and we did 3 weeks of a road trip all around like the Grand Canyon, up the Pacific Coast Highway. Just that whole experience for that summer was crazy. And it was something that I had set for years beforehand. I wanted to make sure I did. I've been quite CV focused and work focused for a long time, and I wanted to be sure that I didn't let that get in the way of like fitting in that summer or those adventures.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that that's the way it turned out.
Man, it sounds great. I mean, anybody who will have, even if nobody's come across you yet, and they're watching this or listening to this, they'll hopefully by this stage they'll know the version of you that I've met, which is energetic, enthusiastic, extroverted, busy. I think busy has to be one of the defining words.
Yeah.
But has it always been that way? Like when did this version of you, have you been this version? When did this version of you take place?
Oh God, yeah, it's just always been that way.
Always
There's
been
no
that
doubt
way.
about that. Yeah. I was actually having a conversation with someone from that Washington DC group just this week about that mad busyness that's just always been there. And I think what that kind of relates back to is probably a mentality that I've always had around stuff, which was like just throw your hat in the ring always. Like whatever it is, you just throw your hat in the ring. You like on that front, not having maybe a fear of any negative outcomes of putting yourself forward for whatever opportunity comes your way. So, and that has led me to all sorts of funny, random things, whether it's like sports related. I ended up like when I was very young, I would have played all the sort of normal team sports like we would have played growing up, like Gaelic football and hurling and soccer for a bit, athletics, all those sort of things. And then I ended up picking up volleyball for like a year. We got to the All Ireland finals for like a year and a half or 2 years. We were trained by the German Olympic coach in archery, which was like a mad experience for like a year and a half. And then like on like the art side of things, I have done like a bunch of TV shows when I was younger. I did like 3 months doing like a professional acting role that toured around Ireland on stage. I've like directed and starred in musical theater and pantomimes and stuff. Like whatever it is, I'm more than happy to just throw my name in the ring, my hat in the ring. And it's always been that way, really. Like this is going back to like 10, 11 years of age, and it was still that way.
So I'm getting a sense of an inherent self-confidence in that, let's say one of those had just gone downhill, or I'm certain there's things that you've done where you've been like, I should not have done that. That was just stupid.
Yeah.
But it hasn't rocked your sense of self. It hasn't rocked your sense of who you are, your self-confidence or anything like that.
Definitely not. But it's a funny one because it's also loaded with contradiction as well. Like there's those sort of things, if they relate to what I feel is like not maybe like an inherent aspect of who you are, like what's the fear of rejection involved in those? Like if it's throwing yourself into a new sport or on stage or like trying a new project, I'm never really worried about the downside of them because like people are just going to forget anyway most of the time. I'm not doing anything that's high enough stakes that'll sit by me forever if I like mess it up and doesn't go well. So I never mind on that front. But I'm like on his other hand, I can be such a cautious person as well when it's maybe related to things that are a little bit more social or a little bit, like I said, maybe inherently reflective of who you are. Sometimes I can be a little bit more skeptical. So it's a weird contradiction to something that.
Well,
Yeah,
that's a great way of putting it, in that, like, anything that you try that's new, it's not a part of who you are right now. So if you were to pick up archery tomorrow, today you don't define yourself as an archer. Therefore, if you're shit at it, that's fine.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, so has that other stuff, that would ever have an effect on who you think you are as a person? Have you ever missed anything that where you were a little bit too cautious and you've gone, and you were too cautious because it was a tad too close to home?
Yeah. I would say so. It's maybe hard to think of examples because they're not the CV pieces. They're not the pieces I would have put in that introduction at the start.
Absolutely.
So whether I had done them or not, because it's a lot of stuff that probably just fits into life. It's like general life rather than like an accumulation of achievements. Like they'd never fit into that short list. It's probably the silly stuff of like the kind of class clown or like approaching random people. It's like some of those things, rather than like putting an application in for something.
Fair. Well, look, this podcast, Life with a Why, it's more so to understand why you do what you do. But let's go more into what you do first. So big into the world of business, tech startups, and it's very much that early stage section of the business process that you spent a lot of time. OpinionX, as you're growing your own startup, but you help people to understand what their own niches are. So even as you grow as a company, you're still going to live in that space of ideation and understanding whether or not these are good ideas. You like to introduce people to entrepreneurship. It's very much that it's not necessarily the building, it's the visions and the ideation and the idea sides of a business that you do. Would that be kind of fair?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think part of the reason why it's an area I'm so passionate about is the impact that you can see on people who do take a part in something like a startup weekend. And like you kind of framed it really well earlier of this stuff. Like if you pick up a new challenge, you don't associate it as being part of who you are. So why be worried about it? What I see often is like someone who does something like a startup weekend for 2.5 days, comes out the other side, and all of a sudden does associate it with who they are. It becomes so integral to the way they view themselves and what they want to do going forward. And seeing how big of a change like a group of people in a room for a weekend can have on an individual that's there, like it's crazy to watch it happen and see someone's entire trajectory for years afterwards just completely change. Like they move into a new path. They start talking about themselves differently in person and online, and like representing themselves differently as well. So I love that side of it. I love how much impact it can have on a person, and that whole startup side of things that extends much more beyond just hackathons. Like, so that's where the seed often gets planted, but seeing it grow is based on a number of steps that are often a lot more difficult, and it's where a lot of people fall off that journey. And what OpinionX in a lot of ways is doing is trying to help more people stay on those early steps and make it to the next one, because it's the part where the most number of people fall off, and it's a very difficult process. So if we can help that, it's just creating a deeper level of impact on stuff that I already know I'm quite passionate about.
Anyone or anything in particular that you're particularly proud of somebody coming in and coming out and as two different people?
One person who definitely, broadly, I think I see the impact on a lot of my friends. So like a lot of my friends, I would have dragged them along to things like startup weekends, and I can definitely see it in them. One person who's a good example, and he's from the university we both went to, is Johannes Rendel. He was he did 1 semester abroad. It was like literally 1 semester was all he was in DCU for. Yeah. And I dragged him along to a startup weekend. I asked him to apply, and then when he applied, he got one of the tickets that I allocated, and he jumped in. He sat very quietly for the whole weekend, and then came up to me afterwards and was like, "This was amazing. It's one of the best things I've ever done." And he has since gone on to become an organizer in Munich in Germany, and has since just recently become a global facilitator as well. And over the last few weeks, he's been hosting in Hungary. He did one like 2 weeks ago, maybe. And he's just jumped on a whole new path, and one that I think he would agree would never have come on his radar had he not gone to that first event. And I see a lot of differences in him, even in his own self-confidence and the way he views his own ability is just different. He was such a quiet person back then. I don't doubt that that's not all attributed to taking part in one startup weekend, but I think he would even agree that a huge part of his life has been changed because he went to that one weekend.
Fantastic. I know him because I follow him on LinkedIn. And I think I
Yeah,
met
yeah,
him when he was in DCU as well.
yeah.
Because
Oh, one person I should throw in also, she'd be so annoyed if I didn't, is Sinead Okeefe, who's another friend of mine. And Sinead, a very similar story, went along to one startup weekend, was someone who, without a doubt, like didn't hold themselves in a light that they should have based on the abilities that they had. Like they really underestimating themselves, regardless of the fact that other people saw a lot more potential than she would have. And Startup Weekend just completely changed her perspective. And she's gone on such a similar path to Jojo, became an organizer, has become really associated with fashion technology based on her participation in Startup Weekend, has gone on to become a global facilitator, became 30 Under 30 Ireland last year. Like her whole path has completely changed as well. And I think she would also agree Startup Weekend is a big determinant of that for her. So I'd be remiss if I didn't throw Sinead's name in the mix there as well.
You just stopped yourself from getting shot. Like
I
that's what just happened there. You went, oh, gotta get this in. So yeah, it seems like that transformative piece is very, very important to you. Do you think there are ways of getting that transformation without actually attending one of these things?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't think there's anything particularly or uniquely special about startup weekends. I mean, the formula is a group of people trying something new with other people that they've never met before. And I think that's just a great recipe for success because people kind of drop their guard. They know it's like a sandbox environment. There's no risk really associated with it because everyone's just trying it out for the weekend. So if you lose, like, who cares? You've gotten a load of pizza and free beers in the evenings and stuff. So it's been fun anyway. So I think that if you apply that recipe to other things, there's the same opportunities everywhere, whether it's jumping on like a backpacking trip for 2 weeks on your own, like solo traveling, which would often also be associated with those same sort of impacts on the way you view yourself, whether it's picking up a new sport or joining a team in something that you haven't done before, trying like musical instruments, whatever it is. It's the idea of joining it with a new group of people in that sandbox environment is like a recipe for success, I think.
I like that. I very much like that. So this, the formula that you're talking about is starting something new, whatever it may be, but doing it in a completely new environment, with new people, a new thing, a new aspect of your life, which also ties back into what we said earlier in that if it doesn't go well, it shouldn't have an impact on who you are, who you feel you are as a person, because it's not a defining value that you would have. That's a great piece of value out of this. So yeah, speaking of values, it seems like a big part of your why, of why you do what you do, is to bring the best out of other people. You sort of see this transformation and you like to facilitate that. So why go into the world of OpinionX and tech startups instead of continuing with the facilitation of the events?
It's good. That's a good question. I think what draws me into startups in general, again, is just like it's such a great group of people. It's always such a great group of people because by nature, like there's so many risks involved. So you need kind of a bunch of headers in a room to get anything done. So it's people with such mad views and are real open-minded, like they're willing to try new things and take risks. And those are great people to spend time with. Like if you're gonna decide what kind of people to spend time with, like that's a pretty good description of who you should be hanging around with. So anytime that I've ventured off from those circles for a few weeks or a few months, I just end up craving those opportunities again, and I just fall back into it. And that's happened so many times. So I think there was an aspect of inevitability to it in some ways, but I kind of took that at the same time and said, okay, rather than just fall into this, like, let's put a plan in place, like properly set the groundworks around OpinionX for like a year and a half, a, a, a solid year anyway, but a bit more into about like a year and a half, where I wanted to be sure that that was what was going to happen. So it wasn't something that just kind of came about for no reason. That's on like a kind of a high level perspective on it. On a much more practical point, the startup weekend stuff is, while it's something that you have to do a lot to earn the position in, it's volunteer based as well. So like all those startup weekends, you don't actually get paid for them. You get your costs covered if you're a facilitator. If you're an organizer, you actually end up just spending like 3 months organizing an event that you don't get paid for in any way. It's all community run. So I was never going to be able to put kind of pancakes in the fridge with that.
Never going to put pancakes in the fridge with that. I like that. Put that on a
Yeah.
t-shirt. So one aspect that we haven't actually tackled, and I feel like it stems from the same part of your being as to who you are, is the civic space. The yeah. I mean, there was Enactus, there was the prisoners and ice cream. You talked on your adventure about getting pulled into representing Ireland again at another civic thing. So if you were to give the advice to somebody to get into the volunteering, the civic side of things, the social action side of things, why would you give that advice to somebody?
Ooh.
I'm assuming it is advice you would give.
It is. So it definitely is. Why is a good question. It's very repetitive as an answer, but my answer as to why and why I jumped into the likes of both startup weekends, which when I did start going to them, they were it was run by a non-profit called Up Global. Later, it became acquired by Techstars. So that was very much like volunteer, community based at the start. And Enactus, which is, for people who don't know, it's a social entrepreneurship, a society that runs in universities all over the world and introduces people to social impact projects. I mean, my main reason for joining all of them was about the people. And that was always the reason. Like startup weekends, I got pulled back and back again because the people that were there were amazing. I was quite young when I started them, and it was like one of the first times I found like a whole room of people who kind of thought the same as me. So that's what kept me coming back to that area. And then obviously, like we said, I saw the impact that they were able to have, and that's really rewarding. And I quite like that side of work. So that's what drew me back into that. With Enactus, again, I joined that because of the people. So I went along in the first place because I knew going into DCU, based on my experience with stuff like Startup Weekend, that I wanted those sort of entrepreneurial minded people. There wasn't really any startup society in the university, and Enactus filled that bucket. I can put my hands up and say I didn't necessarily join Enactus because I was like, I want to set up a social impact project. But that's something that became really important to me while I was going through it, and realized why that is the Enactus program, and why it's all about social impact. So yeah, I definitely didn't join for the usual reasons that you'd be encouraged to go to volunteering. It was this thing that just has popped up loads of times.
So it sounds like a big theme with you is you actively choose the kind of person you want to hang out with. Like you make full certain that you're like, okay, entrepreneurial people, I like them. Where do I find them? You find them at these events. You find them at these startup weekends. You find them at this Enactus. You find them at volunteering. I'm gonna go hang out with them and then be the best version of me.
Yeah.
So if there's somebody listening and or watching this, and they're like, okay, I'm in. I want to give this a go. I've been convinced, and I want to get into a room with strangers and start talking about business. Or if you're listening to this and business isn't your thing and you want to do it in something else, but anyway, I'm going to pick business for this one. What's the first thing you Google? What do you go for to do?
For startups specifically, there's great resources with things like Startup Digest, which are community-run newsletters of all of the events, accelerators, competitions, programs, whatever they are, sent out on a frequent basis that'll let you know whatever is going on in your city or country. They're great. They're in countries all over the world. They're run in multiple cities in Ireland as well, and it's all free. So that's where I point you in the direction for startup-based stuff. And when a startup weekend pops up, you'll see it on Startup Digest. So it's the right step to take on that front. But I think what's more of an umbrella answer to this is that you want to find online communities of like-minded people who are passionate about the same thing that you're passionate about. And thankfully, like, that just continues to get easier and easier. Like, years ago, that was like find a forum. It's even easier than that now. Like, there's Slack groups for every single like interest and passion under the sun. I think I'm in about like 13 Slack groups probably for so many different things, and they constantly run. Is this probably under the guise of COVID a little bit more? But they run so many online meetups and speed dating and just meeting new people, and all those sort of communities have chapters in different countries as well to meet people. Like, those circles are the place to start, because these are people who are going out of their way on their evenings and weekends just to talk about stuff they're passionate about. So it ticks all those boxes. It's open-minded people who are proactive about trying new things and getting outside their comfort zone and learning a new skill. Those are the people you probably want to spend time with, because in my opinion, those are like the most fun people.
Absolutely. So this whole the theme of this podcast is life with a Y. And it seems like I've got an opinion of what your why is, and I don't know whether I should give you mine first, whether I should get yours first. I'm going to give you mine, and I'm going to see where I'm at with it, and then I'd love for you to expand on it before we wrap up. So it seems like earlier on, which we haven't actually touched on, but it seems like early on in your life, you've seen the transformative power of the world, of that exact thing of getting in a room with people that you don't know, doing something new, and just there's a transformation that takes place with that. And it seems like one of your whys is to reproduce that transformative power as much as possible. Not only be it with, I mean, it very much makes sense. There was the startup weekends, but then you've also got the OpinionX that you're doing now, which does that for founders. You've got transforming the lives of the prisoners with Second Scoop. So it seems very much like introducing people to something very new and watching that transformative power and sort of sharing it with people is a why. And I've got the word duty written down here because it's coming from the civic side of things, but I actually feel like it's more so coming from this fact. My interpretation is that you feel like you've like found this scroll and you're trying to show it to people. It's like you've got this whole secret of, hey, you like do this thing. And it has made you quite successful by any definition, really. You listed out your CV at the beginning, and if anybody wants to check you out on LinkedIn, damn. It feels like in you sharing this piece of, hey, I'm doing this and it's helping me to be successful, is sharing your secret of success with people. That's what I determine your why to be. I'd love for you to expand on that. So I'm going to ask you the question, what's your why?
Oh, I don't know. It's so funny. I don't know how I would answer better than what you just said. I think, yeah, I don't really know where to expand it beyond what you said. It's like that duty to share aspects of my experience that have been, like you said, transformational and really positive on the way I like think about things and look for who I should spend time with and all of those different parts of life. yeah, it's definitely a duty to share those things with other people. It's a great way of thinking about it. I feel like one of the things we talk about in this early stage startup space is you learn so much, but you're very blind to your own experience. So like when you're trying to do something, you can get really caught up in the details and you can fall for your own biases and stuff. But if you took one look at a friend's startup, you'd know instantly what they should be doing. And I feel like that's just what's happened here. Like it's hard to distill all of that down when you're living in the chaos of it. Whereas from a brief take, you're probably better set to see that why than I am.
Good to know. Thank you for that. The last question that I'll leave you with is there something you wish other people knew about you? Like something that's not commonly known, whereby you're like, God, I wish people knew this.
Mm.
I get the feeling you're an open book. That's the thing.
Yeah, it is and it isn't. That's a funny thing. I feel, if anything, what it probably is how the perception isn't always the reality as well. Like on, especially on things like podcasts and interviews and anything like that, there's so much of what you see of someone is just one sided, and like people can really view all of that stuff from like a little survivorship bias, that what worked is what defines the success. But like there's so many things that have been messed up along the way of people who have probably had negative experiences working with me because I've like tried to juggle too many things, or I've done all these different bits along the way. So what I probably say is like, don't take from this just the positives. There's all like the flaws and the negative bits behind the scenes as well. There's days where I sit down and just doubt that I'm going to be able to figure any of the challenges out that I'm trying to figure out. Like all of that's there. It's there for everyone. Don't let a podcast mislead you that other people don't have those challenges and doubts and everything too.
Even though we spoke pretty much exclusively about successes, there's a hell of a lot more that we didn't get into.
Oh, so much. And like there always is the nice thing. At least there's
out of interest. You listed a lot of things at the very beginning of this, as to a lot of successes. What percentage of, so if those are your successes, what percentage of that is the overall? Just in general. Is that a 5%, a 10%, a 30%, a 60%, an 80%, 99%?
Oh, I'm trying to think really quickly about all the different things I've worked on. And I feel so I could be a bit of a self-critical person anyway. So what I would view as a lot of the successes are like a lovely little wrapped up version of the story, whereas the failures are part of the successes often. Like one of the real big challenges that I would have worked on before was Dublin Tech Summit, which was like, it was the biggest it is still the biggest technology event in Ireland. It has been since it started in 2017. And like that was a huge achievement. I started there before I even got my Leaving Cert results. I led like a whole department of the company in the first year of it. And on paper, it's a huge success. But there's parts of it that went so wrong. Like some parts of it went so wrong. And a lot of the stuff that went wrong, I know I was personally responsible for. So it's nearly hard to answer. Like the failures are wrapped up in the successes as well. Some of them are just failures and only failures of, but even those, it's hard to say they're only failures. Like there's things that I look back on to do with those things, and like those are some of the places where I learned some of the really valuable lessons that have really helped with stuff like OpinionX. So God, it's such a hard question to answer. Really, the failures and the successes are wrapped up.
Yeah,
I love that. What I would say is I don't really think I've too many failures that are like things where I just didn't take advantage of the opportunity at all, and it was a failure because I didn't try to do it. I don't think there's too many of those. I'm happy about
that. They didn't go well, even though the goal was to just grab an opportunity. The opportunity itself was the problem, not necessarily grabbing it.
Yeah, I don't think there's too many where the failure was from failure of trying.
And that's a great way to be. That could be a part of the self-confidence thing. Well, look, I very much appreciate you coming on this. What do you want to direct people towards? What should people know and or do?
Well, if you have an idea for something and would like to know whether you should pursue it or not, OpinionX is a great place to start. Not only do we have loads of resources on there that you can like read or watch and figure out, we also jump on free 30-minute calls with people all the time just to chat about what they're trying to accomplish and how we can help them figure it all out as well. So check out opinionx.co. Otherwise, if you just want to follow along with all the different things I'm up to, LinkedIn and Twitter are the main places that I kind of post all that stuff regularly. So feel free to follow me there. There's not many Daniel Kynes on the internet, thankfully, so I'm very easy to find if you just search my name.
Nice one. Yeah, that's just the word opinion and then the letter X.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, I could say from personal experience, like this is it's something worth checking out. It's been great watching the journey for the last while, and I'm very much looking forward to watching the rest of it.
Thanks.
Well, look, thank you very much for jumping on, and yeah, I'll chat with you again soon. So there we have it, the life, the why of Daniel Kyne. Now, one of the things that I really learned from today's episode is just how important the idea of being outgoing can be to somebody's level of success. We just listened to Dan talk about trying out new things and the concept that I'm going to be pulling away from this and sharing quite a bit is this concept that when trying new things, it doesn't really matter if something goes wrong or not, because it's not a part of your sense of identity. If you were to challenge a sense of your identity and it goes wrong, well, then that's going to have ramifications. However, if you are not a skier and you go skiing and you are not good at skiing, you're still not a skier. I don't know why I chose that as my analogy. I hope it worked. But if it's not part of who you are, then why not try? And it's very interesting to see the impact that he has had on other people, getting them into the idea of entrepreneurship or hackathons or things like that. This idea of starting something new with a random group of new people and having that be your recipe for success, I think that is something that I will be taking away into all of the newer chapters of my life, and I hope you do too. However, what did you think? What did you think of today's episode? Please do let me know across all of the different social medias that I'm on. Just search Life with a Y podcast. Let me know. I'd very much appreciate it. Do reach out to Dan. Do follow OpinionX. They are doing some really, really interesting things, particularly in the world of tech, but also in the world of idea formation and understanding whether or not your ideas and your business ideas are something that can be turned into tangible services and products. Also, Daniel is a very intelligent person, as you'll have seen from today. So if you follow him the likes of LinkedIn or Instagram, you may actually just learn some things. I know I do. That is the end of today's episode. Next week, we are interviewing Holly Allen, another young, very impressive person. She is a BDR with G2, and anybody who follows Holly on LinkedIn will know that she's a very impressive young woman. Next week, we find out what makes her so impressive and why she does what she does. I hope you're having a good day. Please do let me know if this episode made you think about why you do what you're doing, what impact it has had on you, and I will catch up with you again next week. Thank you for joining me today.